for big business.
RSK, let it play, boy.
Yeah.
When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers. When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers. I wake up and say me a prayer, brush my teeth, babe, then I throw on some threads. Wash my face, grab a cup, pour me some yum, put on my backpack, then I'm off to the bread. I eat these devils for breakfast, gotta be careful. Whole lot of blood being shed in the streets. World is so wicked, I weep for the living, I drop a free tear for the dead. All my white friends in my pocket, or either they loading onto this black card that I swipe. Say every time that I drop it, the verses be hitting more harder than problems of life. Rich, I collected 2 pennies from every person that willingly gave me advice. Being afraid can't exist in my spirit, I'm fearing no man but the Father in Christ. I put in work with the brothers, we stood on them corners from 10 to like 9 to some night, teaching our people the gospel, equipped with a camera, some posters, some speakers and mic. Every time that I see mama, she telling me, son, you gotta walk in the light. Christ, the bread of heaven, keep feeding my spirit, and I wanna load, not a slide. When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers. When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers.
When I tell you I'm an Israelite, tribe of Judah, don't you take it personal. Bleed the blood on these demons, we purging them. Don't entertain Jezebels, we be curving them. Ayy, I got a ribbon, she virtuous. In person, this blue life ain't virtual. I can't forget when I heard the truth. I got cut with that word, it got surgical. Conviction can lead to repentance. I pray these verses encourage you. We repenting, now we on the vertical. Judah rising, see Isaiah 32. Big business, nothing minuscule. I picked up that pen back in middle school. Guard your light and take heed who you listen to. Watch your mouth and your ears and your vision too. Hashatan and Shalkani won't finish you. In Mortal Kombat, this war is not physical. Gird your loins up and follow the general. Messiah is coming, that's scriptural. You gotta starve your flesh. The real war ain't even started yet. This look like a setup for a second exodus. I'm trying to be where the water at. Let's get it.
When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers. When I tell them I'm an Israelite, it's big business, not miniature. Serving same thing as minister. Kill the flesh, how to finish them. These commandments, they'll sustain you. I'm surrounded by these angels. I ain't worried, I'm protected from seen and unseen dangers.
Yo, shalom, shalom. We're back at it, man. 7-gang, source gang of everything. You know how we rocking, man. The long-awaited Haplogroup J video is here, part 1. As promised, the savant from the Levant, my brother Ivri, aka the Hebrew of Israel, is here. And with no further ado, I'm going to give him the floor and let him do what he do.
All right, shalom, everyone. Shalom. Glad to be back and ready to present this Haplogroup J video that I've been working on for the past few weeks. And so let's begin. All right, so is it pulled up? All right, there we go. So Haplogroup J, academic and biblical origins. All right, just move this real quick. All right. So In the past presentations, we discussed about haplogroup E. We discovered that haplogroup E is the likely Y chromosome of proto-Semites. With that being said, today haplogroup J is widespread in the Middle East, but is it of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic in origin? That's what we're here to find out. Is haplogroup J an Afro-Asiatic Semitic marker in origin? In order to do this, we have to learn about the origins of this Y chromosome. Haplogroup J origins can reveal to us the language they first spoke. Their origins can reveal to us which son of Noah they belong to. With that being said, let's dive into the understanding of haplogroup J. So, the origins of haplogroup J. The first J1 men lived in the late Upper Paleolithic, shortly before the end of the last ice age. The oldest identified J1 sample to date comes from Sturbistan in a cave in Georgia. And this was from the study Jones 2015, placing the origins of haplogroup J1 in all likelihood in the region around the Caucasus, Zagros, Tartarus, and eastern Anatolia during the Upper Paleolithic. Like many other successful lineages from the Middle East, J1 is thought to have undergone a major population expansion during the Neolithic period. That was from Sarakan at a 2010 study. Found that the greatest genetic diversity of J1 haplotypes was found in the eastern Anatolia near Lake Van in central Kurdistan. The mountainous terrain of the Caucasus, Anatolia, and modern Iran, which wasn't suitable for early cereal farming, was an ideal ground for goat and sheep herding and catalyzed the programmation of J1 pastoralists. Having colonized most of Anatolia, J1 herders would have settled in the mountainous regions of Europe, including the southern Balkans, which is around Greece, the Carthaginians, central and southern Italy, like in Sicily and Sardinia, southern France, and most of the Iberian Peninsula. So this is where we found the oldest sample of J. It's in Georgia of the Caucasus, J1, late Upper Paleolithic, and about 11,300 BC. Again, this is in Georgia of the Caucasus, in between the Caspian and the Black Sea. So haplogroup J2 is thought to have appeared somewhere in the Middle East towards the end of the last glaciation between 15,000 and 22,000 years ago. The oldest known J2A sample at present were identified in the remains from the Hotu cave in northern Iran, dating from 9,100 through 8,600 BCE. This was found in Lizard's 2016 study, and from the Kotos in Georgia, dating from 7,904 through 7,600 BCE by Jones' 2015 study. This confirms that haplogroup J2 was already found in the Caucasus and southern Caspian region during the Mesolithic period. And so here's a J2A Mesolithic age sample found in the north of Iran, right below the Caspian Sea. Oh, also, by the way, here is the study you can find if you want to look it up. All you have to do is type in letter for word and word for letter of this study. Also for the other one as well. There's links down below. You can type in and pause. Anyways, so here's another study dealing with haplogroup J, continuity and admixture in the last 5 millennium of Levantine history from ancient Canaanite and present-day Lebanese genome sequences. And a part of the study mentions haplogroup J. It says that haplogroup J-P58 is frequent in the Arabian Peninsula, with proposed origins in the Zagros-Tartarus mountain region. Here's another study, the emergence of Y chromosome haplogroup J1E among Arabic speaking populations. It reads, moreover, the previously described J1 chromosomes frequently found in the Caucasus and Eastern Anatolian populations were ancestral to J1E and displayed an expansion time of 9,000 years. For J1E, the Zagros/Tartarus mountain region displays the highest haplotype diversity. Although the J1E frequency increases towards the peripheral Arabian Peninsula. Here's another study: ancient migratory events in the Middle East, new clues from the Y chromosome variation of modern Iranians, and it reads, Haplogroup J is predominant in Iran, where both its subclades J2-M172 and J1-M267 are observed. Its highest frequencies are registered in the populations located along the southwestern coast of the Caspian Sea and along the Zagros mountain range. Exceptionally high is the frequency observed in the Bulachi and the Suristan, Balochistan, in agreement with their likely Caspian Sea origin. And here's one of the latest studies dealing with haplogroup J, the origin and diffusion of human Y chromosome haplogroup J1-M267, came out 2021. So it literally just came out. And so it reads, the J1B-F4306 and J1A2-PH77 branches split off at the very beginning. These are rare lineages distributed mostly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Pakistan. Interestingly, the 13,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from the South Caucasus belongs to J1B-F4306. So the oldest sample of J1 is found in Georgia of the Caucasus. The oldest sample of J2 is found in northern Iran, basically. So this is what we have to keep in mind when it comes to the origin of J. In the Caucasus of Georgia and north of Iran. And this will be important as we go along. So ancient samples of haplogroup J are found in the Caucasus, Anatolia, and Iran for the most part. So the oldest haplogroup J locations. All right. So by the way, here is the Zagros Mountains of Iran. Here is Anatolia, and here is the Caucasus. So this is like the geographical region of J, of early J men. So continuing this study from 2021, and it says Y chromosome haplogroup J-M304 represents the major male lineage in West Asia today. Around the time of the Neolithic demographic transition, the genome-wide ancestry of West Asian populations was geographically structured into three groups. Among them, haplogroup J-M304 is found in the Caucasus/Iranian and Anatolian hunter-gatherers and farmers, but not in the Levantine ones. Unfortunately, so far, DNA studies are missing from the Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, where haplogroup J-M304 is frequent nowadays. Now keep this in mind. I'm going to read this one more time, starting right here. Among them, haplogroup J-M304 is found in the Caucasus/Iranian and Anatolian hunter-gatherers and farmers. But keep this part in mind. But not in the Levantine ones. Unfortunately, so far, DNA studies are missing from the Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, where haplogroup J-M304 is frequently found today. So J wasn't found in Levantine samples, and they were missing in ancient Arabian and Mesopotamia samples. So as we go along, this will begin to make more sense. So, anyways, the J1B, excuse me, you guys. Let me do something real quick.
Powerful information. Powerful information. The brother just dropped the bomb. Again, just like that article
All right,
just
I'm back.
stated. Okay, yeah, go ahead, brother.
I had to take care of something. But anyways, so didn't mean to do that. All right. So the J1B-F4308 and J1A. Wait, did I read this? I did read this. Right. Understand.
You left off on the article that said, unfortunately, so far ancient DNA studies are missing from the Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, where
Right.
haplogroup JM304 is frequent nowadays.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
one
Right.
right there. Yep.
Yeah, but not in the Levantine ones. Okay. So now going over here. So the J1B-F4306 and J1A2-PH77 branches off at the very beginning. These are rare lineages distributed mostly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Pakistan. Interestingly, the 13,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from the South Caucasus belongs to J1B-F4306. So the J1A1-Z18375 branch has a geographic distribution subsequently overlapping with that of the J1B-F4306 and J1A2-PH77 branches. The J1A1B-Z18375 branch is found overwhelmingly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Anatolia. This branch constitutes the aforementioned peak of haplogroup J1-M267 frequency in the Northeast Caucasus. Haplogroup J1-M267 were found among populations living in the Caucasus and neighboring regions. Our Bayesian continuous phylogeographic analysis suggests the origin of haplogroup J1-M267 in West Asia, confirming previous assumptions. Most of the deeply uh, uh, diverged lineages belong to the populations from the north latitudes of the region, in line with the finding of the late Paleocene hunter-gatherer from the South Caucasus. Our analysis provides better statistical confidence for the origin of haplogroup J1-M267 in the area compassing the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, and the Zagros Mountains. So, as stated before, haplogroup J is typically found in the Caucasus, Anatolia, and Iran in both ancient and modern samples. And so here is a good representation of J1 tree. It's found in Anatolia and Europe. And here's basically the range. This is a good map showing the Caucasus and the Irano-Anatolian mountains. So you can visually see like where early J1 were concentrated. With that being said, there is a specific ancient population with haplogroup J that were haplogroup J that we can study, known as the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. This is an important population to learn about because they're a human population with J. So Caucasus hunter-gatherers is a is a auto is an auto mechanical, wait, no, not auto, is a an is a anatol anatomically modern human genetic lineage, first identified in a 2015 study based on the population genetics of several modern West Eurasian, European, Caucasian, and Near Eastern populations. Jones 2015 analyzed genomes from males from western Georgia in the Caucasus. The two males carried Y DNA haplogroup J star, which means the first star, and J2A, later refined to J1-FT34521 and J2-Y12379 star. Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry was also found in the Upper Paleolithic specimen from the Sart Serbia cave, dated to 11,000 BC, and in the Mesolithic one in the Caucasus cave in western Georgia, dated, excuse me, hold on.
Are you there, Avery? Hey, well, for everybody that's tuning in, until we get the brother back, brother's
All
going
right,
over
I'm
some
back.
pertinent information. Brother's back.
All right, sorry about that. So, anyway, so the Sat-Serbial individual is closest to the modern populations from the southern Caucasus. So here's the actual paper that goes into it. Upper Paleolithic genomes reveal deep roots of modern Eurasians. So we sequenced a late Upper Paleolithic Sat-Serbia, a Mesolithic genome from western Georgia at the very eastern boundary of Europe. We term these two individuals Caucasus hunter-gatherers, also known as CHG. We show that CHG, or Caucasus hunter-gatherers, belong to a new, distinct ancient clade that split from WHG, which is Western hunter-gatherers of 45,000 years ago, and from Neolithic farmer ancestors 25,000 years ago. This clade represents the previously undetermined source of ancestry in the Yamnaya or the Yamnaya, and contributed directly to modern populations from the Caucasus all the way to Central Asia. Okay, so by the way, here is the two Caucasus hunter-gatherer samples we found in Georgia, just to visualize it for y'all. Here's a closer image, actually. The Sat Serbia cave of Georgia, right there, and the Caucasus, right there. And again, we're dealing with the Upper Paleolithic and the Mesolithic. So here's just, here, this is the tables I'm just showing y'all from the study. All right, so Caucasus hunter-gatherer contribution and subsequent populations, two subsequent populations. So beginning the Bichon, the Bichon, like younger Western hunter-gatherer, shows strongest affinity to North Europeans, while contemporary South Caucasus populations are closest to the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, thus implying a degree of continuity in both regions stretching back at least 13,000 years to the late Upper Paleolithic. Continuity in the Caucasus is also supported by the mitochondrial and the Y chromosomal haplogroups of the Caucasus, which was mitochondrial H13C and J2A, respectively, and the Satsserbia mitochondrial K3 and Y DNA J, which are all found in high frequencies in Georgia today. So these two Caucasus hunter-gatherer Y DNA is J, and their mitochondrial DNA is H and K. Okay, so just here's a sample, a table sample, showing that major and specifically it's J2 for the Satsserbia and just regular old J1 for the Ketos. Anyways, so why chromosomal haplogroup? So both Georgian hunter-gatherer samples were assigned to haplogroup J, with Ketos belonging to the sub-haplogroup J2A. In a study exploring J haplogroups in 445 individuals from Eurasia, J2A was found at highest frequency in Georgia and Iraq. Intriguing that both the mitochondrial and Y chromosome haplogroups of our ancient Georgian samples have been associated with the Neolithization of Europe. This tentatively suggests a genetic link between Georgian hunter gatherers and early European migrations from the Near East. So basically, what they're implying is that these Georgian hunter gatherers with haplogroup J have a very strong connection to the early European migrations going into the Middle East, because Europeans originally kind of come from the north of the Near East, which is in like the Caucasus. We'll go into that later. So the oldest ethnic populations to have haplogroup J are the Caucasus hunter-gatherers of Georgia in the Caucasus Mountains. And here's just another better like visual of where they found them. This is like a closer look in Georgia, these two caves. And again, just showing you a nice visualization just to so y'all can know where it's at. All right, so therefore, let's look deeper at this population of people since they have the oldest form of J. Do we know what Caucasus hunter-gatherers looked like? The ancient individual from Satsserbia was male with black hair and brown eyes. However, the individual is one of the oldest, is one of the earliest found to carry the derived HERC2NL for blue eyes. The Satsserbia individual also likely had light skin. He was found to carry the derived SLC245NL for light skin. The Satsserbia individual belongs to mitochondrial haplogroup K3 and Y DNA haplogroup J1. About 1.7 through 2.4% of the Satsserbia individuals' DNA was Neanderthal in origin. That's actually a lot of Neanderthal DNA. But anyways, so like EF, but in contrast to Western hunter-gatherers, by the way, EF means European farmers. Like European farmers, but in contrast to Western hunter-gatherers, WHG, Caucasus hunter-gatherers, CHG, carry a variant of the SLC24A5 gene associated with light skin color. Again, this is from the study. And so here is the sample, the table sample, showing that like the probability. And so it's likely that their eye color would have been brown and that their hair color would have been dark. Here's the, let me give you a closer image. Here it is. So we explore further. To explore further, we looked at genotypes in two pigmentation genes proposed to have been strongly selected in the ancestors of modern Europeans, namely SLC45A2 and SLC24A5. Selected SNPs in the SLC45A2 and SLC4A5 genes contributed to lightening of skin and are almost fixed in modern Europeans. We found that Caucasus and Serbia have the ancestral version of the SLC45A2 variant, but both Caucasus hunter-gatherers, CHG, have selected versions of the SLC24A5 gene, compassed by the most commonly associated haplotype, C11, found in modern populations. We found it, like mostly in the Bichan, Caucasus, and Serbia, had dark slash black hair and brown eyes. So Caucasus hunter-gatherers would have been light-skinned, their hair would have been black slash dark, and their eyes would have been brown. What's interesting about this is, for one, Haplogroup J were some of the first people to have light skin. So let's see what an Armenoid phenotype is. So this is the Armenoid phenotype, because again, we're dealing with the Caucasus Armenian region. So the description of the Armenoid phenotype is a short head and high skulled type with fleshy features, a flat occiput, and hooked nose, often black-haired and light brown skin, common in mountainous regions of Asia Minor, especially in Armenia and in Anatolia. And distribution of haplogroup J, which is in Anatolia, Armenia, and Iran, is the general region of the Armenoid phenotypes. As we said before, the J1A, 1B branch is found overwhelmingly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Anatolia. This is the region of haplogroup J, and it fits perfectly with the Armenid type. So just going to read the description of the Armenid. Widespread type found in its most specified form in the mountains of Asia Minor, associated with the ancient Cretans and the Hittite kingdom, common in Armenians, Turks of mountain regions, Tartus, Lebanese, signified in Georgians, Albanians, Kurds, West Persians, Jews across the Mediterranean, Crete, southern Italy, the southwestern Spain, Crete, Tunisia, in Central Asia, Syria traces as far south to Yemen and India. Light brown skin, wavy, dark brown.
Whoa, we lost him. But the brother was cooking, man. He was cooking with Crisco. So give us a minute and the brother will be back, man. You know, a few highlights from what he brought out. The association with white skin, with haplogroup J was powerful. The information he brought up about these people being Iranian Caucasian people, you know, from the Caucasus of Georgia, the oldest samples, ancient DNA is found in those regions. You don't see it in earlier populations in the Levant. You don't see it in earlier populations of Arabia. It's missing in ancient DNA. And remember, if you guys watched my video I did on Sunday, David Reich says to don't discuss the veil. The veil is modern population density. Do not discuss the veil. Discuss ancient DNA. Ancient DNA tells you who was there in times past. And we got the brother back here.
All right. So where did I stop off at?
You stopped right after we basically were recapitulating about where the J was found.
Okay. So did I mention the armanid? Not the
Yeah, the
armanoid, armanid.
armanid phenotype. You went over all that information.
All right. So now I'm at the Anatoliad because they have
Yep.
their own description as well. So the Anatoliad is part of the armanid subtype of Anatolia with uh, Indoroid features. The core population lives in West Anatolia. Anatoliads are the dominant element in Turkey today, but may also be found among the Lebanese, Greeks in the Balkans, Crimea, among Caucasians, and
Ivry,
sometimes in Iran.
Ivry,
Yes, can you hear me?
your screen. You got to share your screen again.
Oh, my bad, my bad. I just
Yeah,
started going.
yeah, man. You on fire, man. You on fire. Powerful information. The people are loving it. Keep up the momentum, brother.
All right. So y'all heard what I said about the Anatolia. I'll just keep the screen here for a few seconds, but this is the Anatolia type if y'all want to like kind of get a visual representation of what these early J men would have looked like, and to some cases still today. But yeah, they would have been like brachiocephalic, dark hair, dark eyes, living in places like Iran, Greece, Lebanon, stuff like that. But y'all can pause it and look at that. But anyway, so we also have the Indo-Iranid. And basically, I'm just to recap, I'm summing up these phenotypes because this is where we found J, the Caucasus, Armenia, Iran, and Anatolia. And so I'm just going over the phenotypes of these people. So the Indo-Iranid, relatively recent contact type with a position intermediate between the Indo bracket and Iraniid, uh, widespread in Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, reaching to West India in the east and Turkey in the west. Light to medium brown skin, straight or wavy, brown black, plentiful hair. So, with that being said, the Caucasus hunter gatherer skin tone does match the believed notions of the descendants of Japheth, which is interesting to me. After all, Caucasus hunter gatherers are the first people to develop the light skin mutation. As we went over in this study right here, they have the light skin mutation. And what's interesting is they're linked to is how light skin is typically linked to Japheth. Perky A. de Rabbi Eleazar said, he blessed Japheth and his sons. They are entirely white, and he gave them for an inheritance the desert and its fields. These are the inheritance with which he endowed them. And this is from Al-Tabari, a Muslim writer, who said, the children of Japheth settled in Safwan toward the north. They are light-skinned and very fair-skinned. This is from Persian historian Tabari, who says, Japheth, whose descendants are very fair-skinned and olive-skinned. This is from Ibn Abbas, a famous Arabic scholar, who said, he made the descendants of Japheth white-skinned. This is from the 13th century Christian Ibn al-Abiri Bar Habarkanis, who says, Japheth, the land of the Reds. So does this make Haplogroup J and Caucasus hunter-gatherers descendants of Japheth? Not 100%. There are still many other elements to look at as well, such as language, which is one of the most important. With that being said, there is a possibility that Haplogroup J Caucasus hunter-gatherers descendants could descend from Japheth, but we don't want to go too far and make assumptions. We want to look at language. So let's do that. With that being said, this leads us to the Yamnaya culture and the interactions between them and the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. So this is the upper Paleolithic genomes, real deep roots of modern Eurasians. And so it reads, we extend the scope of European paleogenomics by sequencing the genomes of late upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic males from western Georgia in the Caucasus, and a late Upper Paleolithic male from Switzerland. While we detect late Paleolithic Mesolithic genome continuity in both regions, we find that Caucasus hunter-gatherers belong to a distinct ancient clade that separate from Western hunter-gatherers. Shortly after the expansion of uh, auto auto not auto anato, ana, uh, anatomically modern humans in Europe, and from the ancestors of Neolithic farmers around the last glacial maximum. Caucasus hunter-gatherer genomes, CHG, significantly contributed to the Yamnaya steppe herders who migrated into Europe 3000 BC, supporting a formidable a formidable a fam, a, from my tongue.
I got
Um,
you. I got you. You want me to pick up right there?
yeah, just that one word, and I can finish it.
Where are we at? Expansion of
It says 3000 BC, supporting a
formative Caucasus influence on this important early Bronze Age culture. The CHG left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, possibly marking the arrival of Indo-Aryan languages.
Now keep that part in mind. I'm going to read just one more time. Caucasus hunter-gatherers left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, possibly marking the arrival of Indo-Aryan languages. And we'll see why this is important. So Western hunter-gatherers, also known as WHG, and Caucasus hunter-gatherers, CHG, are the descendants of two ancient populations that appear to have persisted in Europe since the mid-upper Paleolithic and survived in the LGM separately. So, Caucasus hunter-gatherer origins, CHG, of migrating early Bronze Age herders. We find that Caucasus hunter-gatherer or a population close to them contributed to the genetic makeup of individuals from the Yamnaya culture, which have been implicated as vectors for the profound influx of Pontic steppe ancestry that spread westward into Europe and east into Central Asia, with metallurgy, horse soldering, and probably Indo-European languages in the 3rd millennium BC. Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry in the groups, Caucasus hunter ancestry in these groups is supported by admixture analysis and admixture statistics, which best describe the Yamnaya as a mixture of Caucasus hunter-gatherers and Eastern European hunter-gatherers. So just to sort of make sure I don't sum this up already. All right. So just to sum this section up right here, basically the Yamnaya people, who are likely the ones to have spread Indo-European languages, are a mixture of Caucasus hunter-gatherers and Eastern Europeans, and we'll see why this is important in a minute. So during the early Bronze Age, the Caucasus was in connection with the steppe, uh, part particularly via the Maya culture, which emerged in the first half of the 4th millennium BC. The Maya culture predated, and possibly with earlier southern influences, contributed to the formation of the adjacent Yamnaya culture that emerged further to the north, and may be a candidate for the transmission of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. In the mixture analysis of later ancient genomes, the Caucasus component gives a marker for the extension of Yamnaya admixture, with subsequently contribution to both Western and Eastern Bronze Age samples. The separation between Caucasus hunter-gatherer and both early European farmers and Western hunter-gatherers ended during the early Bronze Age, with a major ancestral component linked to Caucasus hunter-gatherers was carried west by migrating herders from the Eurasian steppe. The foundation group for this uh, se- seismic change was the Yamnaya, who we estimate to owe half of their ancestry to Caucasus hunter-gatherer linked sources. These sources may be linked to the Mayocope culture, which predated the Yamnaya and was located further south, closer to the southern Caucasus. Through the Yamnaya, the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestral strain contributed to most modern European populations, especially in the northern part of the continent. And again, I say this again. Through the Yamnaya, the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestral strand contributed to most modern European populations, especially in the northern part of the continent. Finally, we find that Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry was also carried east to become a major contributor to the ancestral North Indian component found in the Indian subcontinent. Exactly when the eastward movement occurred is unknown, but it is likely included migration around the same time as their contribution to Western European gene pool, and may be linked with the spread of Indo-European languages. So, there's one more. The discovery of the Caucasus hunter-gatherer was the fourth ancestral component of the European gene pool, underscores the importance of a dense geographical sampling of human epigenomes, especially among diverse geographical regions. Its separation from other European ancestral strands ended dramatically with the extensive population, linguistic, technological upheaval of the early Bronze Age, resulting in a wide impact of ancestral strand of contemporary populations stretching from the Atlantic to Central and South Asia. So, Caucasus hunter gatherers contributed to the ancestors of Indo Europeans through the Yamnaya culture. The Yamnaya culture are situated between Eastern European hunter gatherers and Caucasus hunter gatherers. As we said before, the Yamnaya culture is very strongly linked to even modern Europeans, most modern Europeans, and the spread of Indo-European languages. So now we're getting close to a good idea of how this is all working out. So here is actually the table that shows the genome. So here's the Yamnaya. They're situated right in between Caucasus hunter-gatherers and Eastern hunter-gatherers. So over here, here's the Caucasus hunter-gatherer genome, and here's the Western hunter-gatherer genome, and here's the Yamnaya culture. They have half of the Caucasus hunter-gatherer and half of the Eastern hunter-gatherer. I should put an arrow right here as well, by the way. But here they're basically in the middle, basically kind of mixed. So it says right here, the Yamnaya are located in the intermediate position between Caucasus hunter-gatherer and Eastern hunter-gatherer, as I just said. So furthermore, Caucasus hunter-gatherers and Western hunter-gatherers are closely related, both descending from ancestral source in Europe. Western hunter-gatherers, WHG, and Caucasus hunter-gatherers, CHG, are the descendants of two ancient populations that appear to have persisted in Europe since the mid-upper Paleolithic and survived in the LGM separately. So here are a few different tables that kind of show it. Here is Western hunter-gatherer, a European farmer, and Western hunter-gatherer, and basically they share like an ancestral link, like a source. That was a lie, like 46,000 years ago. There's a closer image. the relationship between Caucasus hunter-gatherer and Western hunter-gatherer and early farmers. So, with that being said, let's learn about the Yamnaya culture, since Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed to this population. It's important that you learn about this Yamnaya people, or the Yamnaya people, Yamnaya culture. So, Jones of the 2015 study analyzed genomes from males from Western Georgia in the Caucasus in the late Upper Paleolithic and the Mesolithic. These two males carried Y DNA haplogroup J star and J2A, later refined as J1-Y6305 and J2-1 J2-Y12379 in mitochondrial haplogroups of K3 and H13C, respectively. The researchers found that the Caucasus hunters were probably the source of the Near Eastern DNA in the Yamnaya culture. The Sapserbia individual is genetically closest to the ancient individual, dating to around 9,700 BP, found at the Caucasus rock shelter in Georgia. Together, they form a genetically distinct cluster referred to as Caucasus hunter-gatherer, CHG. In comparison to modern populations, the Sapserbia individual is closest to modern populations of the southern Caucasus. The Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed significantly to the modern European populations by way of the Yamnaya people. Around half of the Yamnaya people's DNA come from the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. The Caucasus hunter-gatherers also contributed to the modern Central Asians and South Asians. The Proto-Indo-Europeans, i.e. the Yamnaya people or the Yamnaya people, are the related cultures and the related cultures seem to have been a mixture of Eastern European hunter-gatherers and peoples related to the Near East, either the Caucasus hunter-gatherers or the Iranian Chalcolithic people with a Caucasus hunter-gatherer component. Each of these two populations contributed about half the Yamnaya DNA. According to Jones' 2015 study, Caucasus hunter-gatherers' genomes significantly contributed to the Yamnaya steppe herders who migrated into Europe 3000 BCE, supporting a formative Caucasus influence on the important early Bronze Age culture. Caucasus hunter-gatherers left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, probably making their arrival of Indo-European languages. So here is the Yamnaya culture, and here is the Indo-European homeland. When you think of Yamnaya or Yamnaya, think of Proto-Indo-Europeans. So, mysterious Indo-European homeland may have been in the steppes of Ukraine and Russia. So, what do we call a male sibling? If you speak English, he is your brother. Greek, you may call him frater. Sanskrit, Latin, Old English, brater, frater, and brother, respectively. Ever since the mid-17th century, scholars have noted such similarities among the so-called Indo-European languages, which span the world, a number more than 400, and dialects are included, if dialects are included. Researchers agree that they can probably be traced back to one ancestral language called Proto-Indo-European, or PIE, PIE. But for nearly 20 years, scholars have debated the validity when and where PIE arose. That PIE was spoken by pastoral herders who lived in the vast steppe lands north of the Black Sea, beginning about 6,000 years ago. One study points out that these steppe land herders have left their genetic mark on most Europeans living today. Fans of the steppe hypothesis are now hailing a genetic study that used ancient DNA from 69 Europeans who lived between 8,000 and 3,000 years ago to genetically trace ancient population movements. Among the team's samples were 9 ancient individuals, 6 males, 2 females, and a child of undetermined sex. From the Yamnaya or the Yamnaya culture north of the Black Sea in today's Russia, beginning about 6,000 years ago, these steppe people herded cattle and other animals, buried their dead in earthen mounds called kurgans, and may have created some of the first wheeled vehicles. Many linguists think PIE, Proto-Indo-European, already had a word for wheel. The team also retrieved ancient DNA from 4 skeletons from the later corded wire culture of Central Europe. The comparison of the 2 cultures' DNA showed that the 4 corded wire people could trace an astonishing 3/4 of their ancestry to the Yamnaya. That suggests a massive migration of Yamnaya people from the steppe homeland into Central Europe about 4,500 years ago. One that could have spread an early form of the Indo-European languages, the team concludes. So here is the Yamnaya culture and their spread dealing with DNA. This is dealing with the spread of Yamnaya steppe pastoralist ancestry. And here below is a spread of the Proto-Indo-Europeans from the North Caucasus into Western Europe, Central Asia, and India. And as we can see, the spread of the Yamnaya perfectly fits the spread of Indo-Europeans because they're essentially the same people. So, thousands of horsemen may have swept into Bronze Age Europe, transforming the local population. Call it an ancient 1,000-men march. Early Bronze Age men from the vast grasslands of Eurasian steppe swept into Europe on horseback about 5,000 years ago and may have left most women behind. These mostly male migrations may have persisted for several generations, sending men into the arms of European women who interbred with them and leaving a last imprint on the genomes of living Europeans, a lasting imprint on the genomes of living Europeans. It looks like males migrating in war with horses and wagons, says lead author and population geneticist Matthias Jacobson of Upper University in Switzerland. Europeans are the descendants of at least 3 major migrations of prehistoric people. Finally, 5,000 to 4,800 years ago, nomadic herders known as the Yamnaya swept into Europe. They were an early Bronze Age culture that came into the grasslands and steppes of modern-day Russia and Ukraine, bringing with them metallurgy and animal herding skills, and possibly Proto-Indo-European, the mysterious ancestral tongue from which all of today's 400 Indo-European languages spring. They immediately interbred with local Europeans who were descendants of both the farmers and hunter-gatherers within a few hundred years, the Yamnaya contributed to at least half of Central Europeans' genetic ancestry. Using a statistical method developed by graduate student Amy Goldberg in the lab of population genetics Noah Ringsberg at Stanford University in Playa Alto, California, the team calculated that there were perhaps 10 men for every woman in the migration of Yamnaya men to Europe, with a range of 5 to 14 migrating men for every woman. Such a such uh, a, a sequence scenario raises red flags for some researchers who warn it's notoriously difficult to estimate the ratio of men to women accurately in ancient populations. But if confirmed, one exclamation is that the Yamnaya men were warriors who swept into Europe on horses or drove horse-drawn wagons. Horses had been recently domesticated in the steppe, and the wheel was a recent invention. They may have been more focused on warfare with fast dispersals because of technological inventions, says population geneticist Remus Nilsson of the University from California, Berkeley, who was not part of the study. But warfare isn't the only exclamation. The Yamnaya men could have been more attractive mates than European farmers because they had horses and new technologies such as copper hammers, and gave them advantages, says Goldberg says. The finding that Yamnaya men migrated from many generations, the finding that Yamnaya men migrated for many generations also suggests that all was not right back home in the steppe. It all implying a continuing strongly negative push factor within the steppe, such as chronic uh, epis, uh, ep, ecod, ec, ec, ecod, ecomin- etym, 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 etymetics or diseases. Sorry about that. Says archaeologist David Anthony at Hartwick University of Antoniette, New York, who was not an author of the new study. Or he says it could have been the beginning of cultures that set out bands of men to establish new political aligned colonies in distant lands, as in later groups of Romans and or the Vikings. So again, here's just a map of the Yamnaya culture. Here's like a genetic map, but here, well, actually both of these are genetic maps. And they show the spread of the Yamnaya or the Proto-Indo-Europeans. And here's basically the languages, a good map of the languages. And as we can see, the spread of the Indo-European genome matches with the spread of the Indo-European languages, going as far as Britain to north of India and as north as Russia or Central Asia. So massive migration from the steppe was a source for Indo-European languages in Europe. We generated genome-wide data from 69 Europeans who lived between 8,000 through 3,000 years ago by enriching ancient DNA libraries for a target set of almost 400,000 polymorphisms. By 6,000 through 5,000 years ago, farmers throughout much of Europe had more hunter-gatherer ancestry than their predecessors, but in Russia. The Yamnaya steppe herders of this time were descendant not only from the preceding Eastern European hunter-gatherers, but also from a population of the of Near Eastern ancestry, which, by the way, are the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Western and Eastern Europe came into contact 4,500 years ago, as the late Neolithic cordwire people in Germany traced 75% of their ancestry to the Yamnaya, documenting a massive migration into the heartland of Europe from the eastern periphery. This steep ancestry persisted in all sampled Central Europeans until at least 3,000 years ago, and is uh, and Euquimidius in present day Europeans. It just means it's seen in present day Europeans. These results provided support for a steep origin of at least some of the Indo-European languages of Europe. However, our study shows that a later major overturn did occur and that steep migrants replaced 70% of the ancestry of Central Europeans. An alternative theory is that the steep hypothesis, which posits that early Indo-European speakers were pastoralists of the grasslands north of the Black and Caspian Sea, and that their languages spread into Europe after the invention of the wheeled vehicles. Our results make a compelling case for the steep as a source of at least some of the Indo-European languages in Europe by documenting massive migrations 4,500 years ago associated with the Yamnaya and the cordwire cultures, which are identified by prominence of the steep hypothesis as vectors of the spread of Indo-European languages into Europe. So I'm just going to show you sort of like how they would have spread it. You have the Proto-Anatolian dialect, the Kurgan cultures, the pre-South dialect, and the North dialect, which will form the Yamnaya, and slowly they will disperse. Men going to the west, and other men going to the east, and some men going to the south and north. Eventually, they'll make their way all throughout Europe, going as far north as Scandinavia and as far west as the British Isles. And they'll even go into as far south as the Middle East, and as far east as India, and as far north as Central Asia. So the Yamnaya culture are Proto-Indo-Europeans. Half of the Yamnaya DNA comes from Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Light skin, which originated with Caucasus hunter-gatherers, was spread by the Yamnaya culture. The light skin pigmentation, characteristic of modern Europeans, is estimated to have spread across Europe in a selective sweep during the Mesolithic. The associated the TYRP1 anils SLC24A5 and SLC45A2 emerged around 19,000 years ago during the LGM, and most likely in the Caucasus. The HERC2 variation for blue eyes first appears around 13,000 to 14,000 years ago in Italy and the Caucasus. Caucasus hunter-gatherers contributed to the formation of the Yamnaya culture, whereas Yamnaya samples had up to 43% of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. An ancient individual from Serbia was a male with black hair and brown eyes. However, the individual is one of the earliest found to carry the derived HERC2 anil for blue eyes. That Serbia individual also likely had light skin, as he was found to carry the derived SLC24A5 anil for light skin. So when these Caucasus hunter-gatherers had mixed with the Eastern Europeans to create the Yamnaya people, this is why light skin was like spread through all of Eurasia. Remember, the Serbia cave was in Georgia. So ancient DNA reveals how Europeans developed light skin and lactose intolerance. So I'll let Yeshub read this bit of the section while I get a sip of water.
All right, let me see if I can get my icon off the screen because it kind of. Wait, never mind. I think I can see that. All right, Clash of Cultures. Ancient DNA reveals how Europeans developed light skin and lactose tolerance. Throughout history, there has been a pattern of culture rising, evolving, and being superseded. Greek, Roman, and Byzantine cultures each famously had their 15 minutes as top dog, and archaeologists have defined a succession of less familiar cultures that rose and fell before that. During the Bronze Age, so far it has been difficult to work out which of these cultures gave rise to which, and eventually to today's population. Bronze Age, around 3 to 1000 BC, was a time of major advances, and whenever one culture developed a particularly advantageous set of technologies, they became able to support a larger population and to dominate their neighbors. The study found that the geographical distributions of genetic variations at the beginning of the Bronze Age looked very different to today's, but by the end, it looked pretty similar, suggesting a level of migration and replacement of peoples not seen in Western Eurasia since. One people that was particularly important in the spread of both early Bronze Age technologies and genetics were the Yamnaya, with a package of technologies including the horse and the wheel. They exploded out of the Russian and Ukrainian steppe into Europe, where they met the local Neolithic farmers.
All right. So by comparing DNA from various Bronze Age European cultures to that of both Yamnaya and the Neolithic farmers, researchers found that most had a mixture of two backgrounds. However, the proportions verified with the cordwire people of Northern Europe having the highest portions of Yamnaya ancestry. Interestingly, cultures with the most individuals with this mutation were the Yamnaya and their descendants. These results suggest that the mutation may have originated in the steppe and entered Europe with the Yamnaya, a contribution of natural selection working on these advantageous traits and the adventurous Yamnaya cultures spread Naya culture passed down alongside it could it could then been helped to spread all through this process still had far to go during the Bronze Age. This significant study has left us with a much more detailed picture of Bronze Age Europeans. They had the light skin and range of eye colors we know today. So here's just a map again showing the spread of the Indo-European / Yamnaya culture, and shows also a map of the of light skin when it comes to indigenous populations way back in the day, and the Indo-European languages. And so everything pretty much overlaps with each other perfectly. So when it comes to light skin, this is from Skin Color and Vitamin D, an update. So it says, interestingly, Eastern and Scandinavian hunter-gatherers had light skin, in contrast to Baltic hunter-gatherers who kept their dark skin only until 3,800 years ago, when farming was introduced into the region by the Bronze Age expansion of people from the Russian steppe origin. These migrants were associated with the Yamnaya culture and emerged out of a mixture between light-skinned Caucasus and Eastern European hunter-gatherers. The SNP RS1426654 within the SLC2485 gene had a single largest effect on skin lightening of all gene variants identified to date. It is located within a large haplotype, block C11, shared by virtually all carriers of this animal, including ancient Scandinavian, Eastern, and Caucasus hunter-gatherers, suggesting that light-skinned variant derives from a single carrier who lived 22,000 through 8,000 years ago in the Middle East. Similarly, haplotype analysis of the SNP RS16891982 of the SLC45A2 gene concluded that this skin lightening mutation occurred only once in the ancestry of the Caucasians. So here's a map showing Caucasus hunter-gatherers basically being one of the first peoples to have light skin. They also had brown eyes, though. And then, of course, Yamnaya people have half Caucasus hunter-gatherer DNA and half Eastern hunter-gatherer DNA. And then they will migrate outward. What did the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans look like? So these are reconstructions of Kurgan graves. And I think this is a pretty good representation of what Proto-Indo-Europeans would look like. Pretty good representation. So here's another burial. And here's another one. So when the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans spread across places such as Europe, they wiped out much of the indigenous inhabitants. They often killed the men and took the women as wives and adopted the culture of the wives, but also brought their own culture. So this is from how the genocidal Yamnaya men love to switch cultures. So teams led by David Reich at Harvard Medical School and Elsk Wessler at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark announced independently that occupants of cordwire graves in Germany could trace about 3/4 of their genetic ancestry to the Yamnaya. It seemed that cordwire people weren't simply copying the Yamnaya to a large degree, but actually were the Yamnaya in origin. Gravel practices shifted dramatically. A warrior class appeared, and there seemed to have been a sharp upsurge in lethal violence. I've become increasingly convinced that there must have been a kind of genocide, said Christasian at the University of Gothenburg, Switzerland. For reasons still unclear, the corded wire people fully embraced it. They simply take on part of the bellpecker package and became bellpecker people, says Christesian. The fact that the genetic analysis shows that Britons then all but disappeared within a couple of generations might be significant. It suggests the capacity for violence that emerged when the Yamnaya lived in the Eurasian steppe remained even as these people moved into Europe, switched identity from Yamnaya to cordwire, and then switched again from cordwire to bellpecker. So here is how the Yamnaya spread, specifically going into Europe, going from the Caucasus, going to this region, then going into Central Europe, then going into the British Isles. And so it reads, in fact, there is much stronger evidence that these Yamnaya Beckers were ruthless. By about 4,500 years ago, they had pushed westward into the Iberian Peninsula, where the bellpecker culture originated a few centuries earlier. Within a few generations, about 40% of the DNA of people in the region could be traced back to the incoming Yamnaya Beckers. According to research by a large team, including Reach, that was published this month, More strikingly, the ancient DNA analysis reveals that essentially all the men have Y chromosomes characteristic of the Yamnaya, suggesting only Yamnaya men had children. The collision of these two populations was not a friendly one, not a equal one, but one where males were outside, but one where males from outside were displacing local males and did so almost completely. Reach told News New Scientist Live in September. This supports Christesian's view of the Yamnaya and their descendants as almost unimaginably violent people. A striking example of this distribution is a discovery made near the town of Belén de la Castellan in southern Spain. Archaeologists working there found a Yamnaya-like kurgan, below which was a body of a man buried with a dagger and Yamnaya-like sandals, and decorated with red pigment, just as Yamnaya, dead were. But the burial is 4,875 years old. So this is another study dealing with the Yamnaya, the most violent group of people who ever lived. Horse-riding Yamnaya tribe who used their huge height and muscular build to brutally murder and invade their way across Europe than 4,000 years ago. So Yamnaya people dominated Europe from between 5,000 and 4,000 years ago. It is believed that, let me just see, I kind of went over some of this. I'll just gloss through it. So a brutish tribe of people who lived in the Neolithic era more than 4,000 years ago is being touted as the most violent and aggressive society to ever live. A growing body of evidence is convincing archaeologists that Yamnaya society ruthlessly massacred opposing societies. DNA evidence from several prehistoric burial sites have revealed hordes of tall, muscular, and violent warriors would overwhelm other societies on horseback. They would murder men and stare their own children, so that within a few generations, the presence of the previous society is all but eradicated. And let's see. So this is like the Yamnaya people interbred with the Cordwire people, who made the pictured pottery in Central Europe, with later generations inheriting a significant amount of Yamnaya DNA. And so Yamnaya people arrived in Eastern Europe approximately 5,000 years ago, and their culture and customs spread rapidly to both the East and West. They then interbred with the Cordwire people in Central Europe, and with later generations inheriting a significant amount of Yamnaya DNA. And so here's a grave. It says evidence of a fight back against a brutal folk comes from a archaeological site in Germany. Here, graves were found with large amounts of women and children were buried together after being massacred. So yeah, it's very interesting. The Yamnaya took over and erased all genetic evidence of the land's previous stewards, and so we kind of went over a lot of this. So here's another paper that goes into it. Unraveling ancestry, kinship, and violence in the late Neolithic mass grave. I'll just kind of skim through this. The sequence of genomes of 15 skeletons from a 5,000-year-old grave in Poland associated with the gold barrel culture. All individuals had been brutally killed by blows to the head, but buried with great care. Genome-wide analysis demonstrate that this was a large extended family, and that the people were buried with them, and that the people were buried with, and that the people who buried them knew them well. Mothers are buried with their children and siblings next to each other. from a population genetic point of view, the individuals clearly distinct from neighboring courtwire groups because of their lack of steep ancestry. Although the reason for the massacre is unknown, it is possible that it was connected with the expansion of the courtwire groups, which may have resulted in violent conflict. And so, let's see. The third millennium BC was a period of major cultural and demographic changes in Europe, and that signaled the beginning of the Bronze Age. People from the Pontic Steppe expanded westward, leading to the formation of the Courtwire complex and transforming the genetic landscape of Europe. And let's see. Here we present a detailed study of a late Neolithic mass grave from southern Poland, belonging to the Goldberg Amphithea culture, and containing the remains of 15 men, women, and children, all killed by blows to the head. Let's see. The bodies had been carefully laid out according to kin relationships by someone who evidently knew the deceased. And it says, from a population genetic point of view, the people from Kozakek are clearly distinct from neighboring courtwire peoples. Basically, they were different from the Yamnaya peoples because of their lack of steep related ancestry. Although the reason for the massacre is unknown, it is possible that it was connected with the expansion of the courtwire groups, which may have resulted in the competition for resources and violent conflict. Let's see here. Okay, so I'll just read some of this. Overall, we identified 4 nuclear families in the grave, which are for the most part presented by mothers and their children. Closely related kin were buried next to each other. A mother was buried cradling her child. The siblings were placed side by side. Evidently, these individuals were buried by people who knew them well and who cared, placing them in a grave according to familial relationships. For example, individual 14, the oldest individual in a grave, was buried close to her 2 sons. Individuals 5 and 15, individuals 8, a 30 through 35-year-old woman was buried with her teenage daughter. Individual 9 and 5-year-old son. Individual 13, using genomic-wide patterns of IBS, we were also able to reconstruct more complex relationships. Individual 5, 10, 11, and 15 all appear to be brothers, and yet they do not have the same mother. Individual 14 was the mother of individual 5 and 15, but not 10 and 11, suggesting that they might be half brothers. However, all 4 of them share the same mitochondrial DNA haplotype, suggesting that their mothers might also have been related. Interestingly, the older males/fathers are mostly missing from the grave, suggesting that it might have been them who buried their kin. The only father present in the grave is individual 10, whose partner and son are placed together opposite him in the grave. In addition, there is a young boy, individual 7, age 2 years old, or 2.5, whose parents are not in the grave, but he is placed next to other individuals to whom he is closely related through various second-degree relationships. Finally, there is individual 3, a adult female who does not seem to be genetically related to anyone in the group. However, her position in the grave close to individual 4, a young man, suggests that she may have been as close to him in life as she was in death. Intergroup conflict and violence. All individuals buried in the mass grave. Evidence of injuries. Let's see. The most common injuries are cranial fractures, which indicate that the individuals were killed by a blow to the head. Overall, the nature of these injuries are near absence of so-called perifractures. Injuries sustained to the upper limbs, suggesting that the individuals were captured and executed rather than killed in hand-to-hand combat. So let's see right here. The brutal events such as the family massacre documented in the burial may have been all too common in the upstable Tertimonious centuries at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE. Okay, so here's the grave. This is the grave that they found. Basically, to sum up this study, when the Yamnaya people or the Proto-Indo-Europeans started coming into Central Europe, or just Europe in general, they started wiping out a lot of the indigenous inhabitants. And these are the, some of the graves of the people we found who were slaughtered. And they slaughtered the women and the children. And here's basically the lineup of how the bodies were put together. This is like a 3D model showing how it would have looked. And so yeah. So putting our information together, we see that the Yamnaya culture were Proto-Indo-Europeans that expanded from the North Caucasus across Eurasia. What does the Yamnaya culture have to do with Caucasus hunter-gatherers? The Yamnaya Proto-Indo-Europeans derive half of their ancestry from Caucasus hunter-gatherers. It's from Caucasus hunter-gatherers that they even get light skin, which is seen in all modern Europeans. This leads me to the next question. Were Haplogroup J Caucasus hunter-gatherers part of the Proto-Indo-European expansion? Haplogroup J and Proto-Indo-European. So, genetic analysis of Yamnaya genomes conducted by Alphont 2015 and Hake 2015 revealed that Yamnayans were a blend of 3 ancestral populations that dominated the dominant element 55 to 85% was Mesolithic Eastern European hunter-gatherers associated with Y haplogroup R1A and R1B. Then came the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Admixture make up about 15 to 25% of their genomes. This admixture is mainly associated with haplogroup J, and indeed, one J star sample was found in Mesolithic Russia. It has been confirmed by ancient DNA that J2B was found among Neolithic farmers in eastern Transcaucasus and in a case in northwest Iran. And there is convincing evidence that these J2B farmers crossed the Caucasus to settle in the Volga Ural region during the early Neolithic. We can find haplogroup J in all throughout Mesolithic and Neolithic Europe and Central Asia. So here is a J1 sample we found in Mesolithic Russia, all the way in northern Russia. Here is a Neolithic sample of J2 found in Hungary in Central Europe. Here is another J2 sample found in Neolithic Europe in Hungary. And here again is a third sample of J2A found in Neolithic Europe, Hungary. And here is a sample of haplogroup J1 found in Chalcolithic Turkmenistan. Here is another sample of J1 found in Turkmenistan, and a J2A sample found in Turkmenistan, and a J sample found again in Turkmenistan. So we found various ancient samples of haplogroup J throughout Eurasia. There are even branches of haplogroup J only seen among Europeans and not in the Middle East. So here, by the way, is some of the oldest samples of haplogroup J we found. A very old sample in France, of course, in northern Iran, in the Caucasus, Anatolia, in Austria, which is in Europe, in Hungary. And so here are some of the oldest samples of J we find. So let's deal with J when it comes to Europeans. So most J1 Europeans belong to the J1-Z1828 branch, which is also found in Anatolia and the Caucasus, but not in Arabic countries. The Z1842 subclade of Z1828 is the most common variety of J1 in Armenia and Georgia. So furthermore, there is much evidence that haplogroup J could have been among Proto-Indo-European migration, which stretched from Europe to India. Visually, you can see an interesting overlap between haplogroup J and Indo-European languages. So here is haplogroup J, and here is Indo-European languages. Remember, the Yamnaya culture began their migration from the northern Caucasus and were going west into Europe and east as far as Central Asia and even Siberia. Many Turkic tribes and other Central Asians have Yamnaya ancestry. This paper actually goes into that. Nomadic herders left a strong genetic mark on Europeans and Central Asians. So the Bronze Age came to Europe and Asia 5,000 years ago, leaving a trail of metal tools, axes, and jewelry, which stretched from Siberia to Scandinavia. But was this powerful new technology an idea that spread from the Middle East to European and Asian people, or was it brought by foreigners? Nomadic herders from the steppes of today's Russia and the Ukraine brought their culture and probably languages with them, and made a relatively recent and lasting imprint on the genetic makeup of Europeans and Asians. In the study published online today in Nature, two rival teams of geneticists analyzed the DNA from 170 individuals who lived at key archaeological sites in Europe and Asia 5,000 to 3,000 years ago. Both teams found strong evidence that a wave of nomadic herders known as Yamnaya from the Pontic Caspian, a vast steppe land stretching from the northern coast of the Black Sea and as east as the Caspian Sea, swept into Europe sometime between 5,000 and 4,800 years ago. Along the way, they may have brought with them Proto-Indo-European, the mysterious ancestral tongue from which all of today's 400 Indo-European languages spring. These herders interbred with local farmers and created the cordwire culture in Central Europe, named for the twisting cord imprint on the pottery. Their genes were passed to North and Central Europeans living today, as one of the teams posted a reprint server earlier this year and published today. But in a new twist, one of the teams also found that Yamnaya headed east from their homeland in Eurasia steepelands, moving all the way to the Altai mountains of Siberia, where they replaced local hunter-gatherers. This means that this distinctive culture of pastoralists who had ox-driven wagons with wheels, and those warriors rode horses, dominated much of Eurasia from north-central Europe to central Siberia and northern Mongolia. They persisted there until as recently as 2,000 years ago. Now we see the Yamnaya as not only spreading north into Europe, they're also spreading east across the Urals, getting all the way into Central Asia, all the way into the Altai between Mongolia, China, and Siberia, says evolutionary biologist Eski Wilversity. of the University of Copenhagen, author of one study. Archaeologists have long noticed connections between the steppe cultures, such as the Yamnaya and Bronze Age people in the east, who lived in the Men-Sinskov Basin and the Altai Mountains of South Siberia and Mongolia about 5,500 to 4,500 years ago. All of these traits also link them to the people in Central and Eastern Europe, including the Yamnaya and Kortwar people, who are thought to have spoken early Indo-European languages. One of the new studies, Willersiv's international team sequenced the genomes of 101 ancient peoples from across Europe. They found that the Yamnaya of the Samara Valley in the northern steppe of Russia were genetically indistinguishable from the Afanzov of the Altai and the Yamsia region of southern Siberia, which confirms archaeologists suggest that there was a vast migration of steppe pastoralists to the east. But unlike in Europe, where the Yamnaya interbred, many local farmers in Yamnaya moving east completely replaced the local hunter-gatherers, perhaps because this region was only sparsely populated, Wilser says. This eastern branch of the Yamnaya persisted in Central Asia and perhaps Mongolia and China until they themselves were replaced by fierce warriors in chariots called the Centastia. These people from the Urals and Caucasus, who were genetically related to Central Europeans, persisted in Central Asia until 2,000 years ago, which means that people in Central Asia were actually more likely Europeans than Asians. So not that long ago, a lot of Europeans were basically in Central Asia before Asians came in. So it wasn't until relatively recently, just 2,000 years ago, that these Caucasians were replaced by immigrants from Eastern Asia, such as the Karaskup, the Massacre, and other Iron Age cultures that today make up the ancestry of people in Central Asia. The implications of these genetic links between the Asian and European Bronze Age cultures are far-reaching. A few closely linked groups from the steppe dominated a huge area from Europe to Asia and shaped major parts of the genetics of Europeans and Asians. We now have samples all the way from Spain and the Atlantic Ocean to Central Siberia, says population geneticist Losif Lidzards of Harvard University and a co-author of the second study led by David Reich, also of Harvard. Both studies found that these people brought genes for light skin and brown eyes with them, although northern hunter-gatherers already had light skin as well, Wilson's team found. The massive migration from the steppe also may have spread the Indo-European languages that have been spoken across Europe and Central Asia, and Central and Southern Asia since the beginning of the recorded history, including Italic, Germanic, Slavic, Hindi, and Tokchin languages, among others. So what's interesting is that when these Proto-Indo-Europeans spread into Europe, they also spread into Central Asia, which at one point had far more European peoples than it does today, and this is why a large part of all of Eurasia is fairly light-skinned. So the people of Central Asia were more European than Asian due to the Yamnaya expansion and settling in these regions. This is fascinating because you do find many Central Asians and Turkic tribes with haplogroup J. If you look at a map dealing with the territory of Central Asian tribes, they do overlap with haplogroup J. So here's haplogroup J and just the history of Turkic peoples throughout Eurasia. Dr. Nathaniel Jansen believes in a more Turkic origin and migration for haplogroup J. So Yashub, if you mind, can you look up this video? And there's a because I think when you play it off your screen, it might be clear for the people. And there's a section I want you to look up.
I think I know what part you want. I got you.
I brought up the sections that you can play because we're not gonna play the whole video, just these specific sections right here.
All right. Can we identify Jews?
Dr. Nathaniel Jansen believes that there's a very strong Turkic origin for haplogroup J. We're just gonna look at his model real quick.
So the fun thing,
because after all, we just got done talking about how the Yamnaya people spread into Central Asia, and haplogroup J could have been part of that migration of Proto-Indo-Europeans, because people will have you believe J is only in the Middle East. It's not only there. It was found in Mesolithic Russia, found in Neolithic Hungary. So we got to look at all right, so you can start at 18.14, 18 minutes and 14 seconds.
Surprisingly, one of the keys to understanding the history of this lineage comes from a study that didn't even sample the Middle East. This first study we looked at early on in these episodes, the 1,000 Genomes Project, the one that sampled the major locations of where the people are, didn't even have lineages in the Middle East. Yet it did have members of Group J.
Can you keep the screen up so I can see where to stop?
Study of the Y chromosome. One of the first studies I examined and one of the first puzzles I had trouble solving. Group J in this study is heavily populated by, you see the colors here, gold and green. Europe.
Okay.
You can stop, by the way, when you play that clip, you can stop at 20 minutes and 15 seconds. You stop right there. Just giving you that heads up.
Stop where?
You can stop at 20 minutes and 57 seconds. 20 minutes, 57 seconds. And you can go back if you want, just in case the people didn't.
Okay.
So basically from 18 minutes to 14 seconds to 20 minutes to 57 seconds. You can also look at my screen if you want to see the others, where the others can stop at. Like, you can, I guess, write it down if you want. If you want to flip back to my screen.
Surprisingly, one of the keys to understanding the history of this lineage comes from a study that didn't even sample the Middle East. This first study we looked at early on in these episodes, the 1,000 Genomes Project, the one that sampled the major locations of where the people are, didn't even have lineages in the Middle East. Yet it did have members of Group J. And this was historically, in my own study of the Y chromosome, one of the first studies I examined and one of the first puzzles I had trouble solving. Group J in this study is heavily populated by, if you can just see the colors here, gold and green, Europeans and peoples of South Asia. We'll zoom in here just momentarily so you can see them. Yes, you have peoples in the Americas, but again, I think this is carryover from Europe. Sadly, most Latin Americans have European ancestry, not indigenous American, because the die-off of these peoples after the arrival of Columbus. So even though they're gray here, Native American, so-called Latin American, actually this should be gray as well, this Colombian. But for that matter, we could color them all likely gold as well because they're of European descent. So you have this European/American group here. You can see Colombians, Italians from Tuscany, Finnish peoples. Then you have some of the South Asians, Pakistanis, Gujaratis, who are living in Houston but trace their ancestry to India, Punjabis, Bengalis from Bangladesh, Indian Telugus, so forth. That's the major groups here in this group J, because these are the people that were sampled. British person here as well, Sri Lankans. That's what you find here in group J. And I want to zoom back out so that you can see part of the big picture pattern here, and a pattern that really stumped me when I first saw it. So this may be small to the screen you're looking at, but if you try to squint and see the colors, you'll see that there's a general grouping of gold / gray. I'm going to lump the gray in with the gold. Basically a European subgroup here, and then an Indian, South Asian subgroup here, and then another European subgroup here, and an Indian. They kind of alternate. They're not all intertwined. It's like there was a group that went off this direction and then off this direction. They share a common ancestor back here, but it's like whatever population they came from went their separate ways and stayed in Europe or stayed in South Asia thereafter. These clusters have common ancestors in the 700s to 1100s. And early on in my study of the Y chromosome, I thought, what in the world is this? Is this now evidence against the Y chromosome clock? I can't think of anything that connects these sections of the world together. And then I came across this study, the one we just mentioned, that has samples of the Middle East. And you can see in red here, there's a lot of red. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And this is the explanation. This must be why Europe and India are connected. The connection must run through the Middle East. And the geography of J, or at least the fact that it runs through the Middle East, reminded me immediately of the Islamic conquest, beginning in the 600s AD with Muhammad and his followers, and eventually spread through North Africa, got into Europe. You can see it extends to the edge of India, is in Pakistan. This seems to fit then these clusters. But then I got stuck on the dates again as I looked into this history more so. Yes, Muhammad and his followers, and the people thereafter, is Arab Muslims, got as far east and west as is shown here. But by the mid-800s, the eastern part of their empire began to be reconquered by Central Asian peoples. So that by the mid-800s, this part of the Islamic empire was being cut off from India. And before the time of Columbus, the 1100s, the Muslims were being pushed out of Spain. So if we're getting cut off here in the 800s from South Asia, how in the world do you connect this part of the world to this part of the world up into the 1100s?
Learn a language with clickable subtitles. Choose from hundreds of foreign teachers.
Where I began to scratch my head again. Now what? How do you explain this? What's the history of Group J? How do you connect Europe and India? In fact, it turns out that this Europe-India connection was one of the keys to unraveling a surprising explanation for Group J, and by extension, the good chunk of the Jewish population in the world today. Let's go back to India, because this is where one of the keys to understanding it emerges. And let's work through the history of India from the present, working backwards. The modern Indian state traces its origins to the 20th century, where they throw off British rule. So you step back from the modern Indian state and you run into the British Raj, which rules from the 1800s onwards. They're here because the East India Company arrives in the 1600s. They arrive not to a British Raj, obviously, but to the Mughal Empire. And we discussed in previous episodes that the Mughal Empire comes from the Persian word for Mongol, because this is of Mongol origin. Well, that's intriguing. However, neither of these historical events seems to be a good explanation for the connection between India and Europe. For one, hardly any British peoples are in this J grouping. So that doesn't seem to fit. And the Mongols, even though we've already seen connections between Europe and South Asia due to the Mongols, the dates seem to be too late. Well, who precedes the Mughals? The Mughals are preceded, at least in North India, by the Delhi Sultanate. By the name, you might start to think some sort of Muslim-Islamic connection. Ethnically, though, if you look at history books, this is not Arab Muslim in origin. It's, if anything, led by an Iranian type people, but the history books will talk about the Turkish invasion of India because many of the members of these armies, as well as some of the Arab armies, were manned by slaves. In Egypt especially, there were slaves who were being enlisted in the Muslim armies. And in the Iranian leadership leading to the Delhi Sultanate, there were massive numbers of Turks as part of this army. And so history books will talk about the Turkish invasion of India that gave rise to the Delhi Sultanate. Well, 1200s, this is now much closer to the dates that are relevant. And what's even more intriguing is it's the Turks that are responsible for pushing the Arab Muslims back towards the Middle East. It's the Seljuk Turks who in the thousands AD are overrunning the Middle East. Now, if you're like me, you hear Turks and you think modern day Turkey. Their origins are actually here in Central Asia, and this history is part of the explanation for how they got to Turkey. This is 1000s AD, and again, a different group of Turks is now coming down into India 100 or so years later. So the split between these eventual Turkish peoples and those who come into India happens right around 1100 AD. Turks don't stay in the Middle East, though. They're overrun within a century or two by the world's greatest empire, the Mongols. Notice, though, that even though the Mongols skirt India, essentially cut off this part of the world from India, and of course conquer much of Central Asia, get into Eastern Europe, get into the Middle East, they don't quite conquer all of Turkey, and the Turkish peoples persist in Western Turkey. And in fact, they throw off the Mongols and begin to reconquer again, and last for several hundred years under the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Turkish Empire, which rules, notice here, parts of Europe, the Balkan Peninsula, they're in the Middle East, parts of North Africa, and they're in both Middle East and in Europe for several hundred years. They're in one or the other for longer than this. Of course, they're in Turkey in the 1300s. Notice, though, that they're in the Middle East into the 1900s. Think back to history that might be more familiar. World War I, they're one of the World War I powers, the Ottoman Empire down here. You can see some of the other, perhaps more familiar entities during World War I up on this map. My point is the highlight here, Turkish people, you're right into the modern era, and they're connecting Europe down here. And the connection of the Turkish people to India goes back to the split between the Seljuks and whoever these other Turkish people were going back in the Delhi Sultanate back in the 1100s. So notice how the realm of the Ottoman Empire, getting down into the Middle East, and again, this is eventually cut off. Go back to the previous slide here. You can see how much it's decreased by the 1900s, but it's still extending down here to the Middle East. This is a very intriguing geographic echo, the concentration of Group J in the Middle East and elsewhere. Today, the Ottoman Empire seems to explain the concentration today, and the history of the Turks seems to explain why we can have connections here and here, and the lack of a heavy Turkish presence in either of these places in recent history might explain why it's such a low concentration there. It fits the timing of the splits in these clusters, and here's how, just to make it clearer why. Why would there be a Turkish connection to Europe in the 700s? Because I said there's some clusters here that separate in the 700s. Well, recall from previous episodes that there's a steady stream of Central Asian peoples into Europe from the 500s, 700s, and one of the 700s peoples is a Turkish group. The Oghuz peoples moving from Central Asia into Europe are Turkish peoples. They're not the only Turkish peoples. There are Turkish people who stuck around Central Asia and became then part of the Turkish armies that came into India. These are not the only Turkish people. There was a split between whoever these people were and the Seljuk Turks in the thousands. So that would explain the 1100 split as they go this way. These are the Seljuk Turks go this way. And these two groups are separated by the arrival of the Mongols. And those who persist in modern-day geographic Turkey expand after the arrival and throw off the Mongol yoke and have this empire that persists in the Middle East up until the modern time. So let's watch this history again with one map to make it even clearer, because the Turkish peoples, in my view, are the best explanation at present for this Group J. not Arab Muslims. So these peoples, even though I think Turkish peoples as here. In history, their origin is not there. It's in Central Asia in the 600s. Turkish people arise in Central Asia in the 600s. Some of these people begin migrating to Europe in the 700s, which is why I think we see some of the echo and the splits between Europeans and Indian peoples at that point in time. There's another split that happens, the Seljuk Turks, which give rise then to the modern Turkish peoples around the thousands. But there's still Turkish peoples left over. The split happens in the thousands, and those who are still left over move down then and are invading, part of the armies that invade India in the 1200s. I mentioned the last episode talking about the Vikings, that there's this general rule of thumb that seems to emerge in the human family tree, that last empire standing wins. Yes, you might invade and take over, but if there's some people group that comes in after you and then wipes you out, they're the group that's going to be dominant today. So, yes, they arrive in Europe in the 700s, but there's many other peoples who arrive after them. So they're a minority of European peoples today. The peoples in India, we saw that the Delhi Sultanate is followed by the Mughal Empire, the Mongols. And so they're not the last empire standing. They're a minority of India today. Even the Seljuk Turks, as they pass through the Middle East, are not the last empire standing. The Mongols march through here, and after the Mongols, are other Iranian peoples who then rise. And so they're not the major grouping in this part of the world today, not even in the Middle East, because the Turkish people here are followed by the Mongol conquest. So the Turks are pushed into modern-day geographic Turkey as a result of the Mongol conquest, but then they begin reconquering again and become the last empire standing in other parts of the world. They move into Europe, but eventually pushed back out. They move into parts of North Africa, and perhaps more importantly for our study, they're in the Middle East for several centuries, right up until the modern era, when the modern Muslim countries, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, emerge today. This history of the Turks seems to find a very strong echo in the geographic extent of Group J today. So who are the Jews? Who are modern-day Jewish people? Well, it seems that the section, I should say, a subsection of modern Jews.
Are you a Christian educator who wants your students to stand strong in today's culture storm? We've partnered with leading creation ministry,
along with many other Middle Eastern peoples, and some Europeans, like Greeks and other Balkan and Peninsula folks, and Italians, and even some Spaniards at a low percentage, and even some Indians, all share a common Turkish heritage. They trace some of their origins to Central Asia. Not all of these people, but if you're in the Middle East, a heavy percentage of you do trace your origins via Group J to the Turkish people. And what we've seen in this episode is, once again, Central Asia seems to play this dominant role in the world history of peoples. We've seen other Central Asian lineages, R1A, R1B, due to Mongols, Magyars. We hear the Turkish people are showing up in the Middle East. They have a dominant presence. They're about a quarter of the peoples in India. The fingers of Central Asia, even though they don't necessarily occupy much attention in the history of Western civilization, politically they don't play a huge role in Europe, but in terms of their DNA, massive echo in Europe, in the Middle East, significant imprint in India, and even now in North Africa. But could there still be an ancient Jewish lineage that we haven't yet discussed?
Do you want to stop here?
Or haven't yet discovered?
Yeah, you can stop there. I think you can stop there. I may have written something down wrong. I'm looking at it now. I said 33 through 38 through 33 through 17. We can just keep going though, even though I may have wrote that part down wrong. But anyways, this does make sense because you do find an interesting overlap. What Dr. Jensen says makes sense because you do find an interesting overlap between Turkic Central Asian peoples. If you look at haplogroups, for instance, this is haplogroup J2, and here are like various Turkic tribes and peoples. But what we also have to remember is that Central Asians could have obtained haplogroup J from the Yamnaya expansion, and haplogroup J males were part of the spread. We know Yamnaya men, um, like they had half of their ancestry from Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Furthermore, the expansion of haplogroup J males with the Yamnaya could have even explained why we see Central Asian Indians with haplogroup J. Perhaps haplogroup J entered India through the Indo-Aryan invasion set off by Yamnaya Proto-Indo-European migration. So just going down below to the last sentence, it says Caucasus hunter-gatherers left their imprint on modern populations from the Caucasus and also Central and South Asia, possibly marking the arrival of the Indo-Aryan languages. And just reading what's in yellow, it says through the Yamnaya, the Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestral strand contributed to most modern European populations, especially in the northern part of the continent. Skipping down, exactly when the eastward movement occurred is unknown, but is likely included migration around the same time as their contribution to the Western European gene pool, and may be linked to the spread of Indo-European languages. So here's a paper that actually goes into haplogroup J and the Indo-Aryan migration. It says within the Indian subcontinent, J2A peaks at frequencies of 15 through 25% around the Indo-Pakistani border of Punjab to Jharkhand and Sindh. Archaeological evidence of a mass migration from the southern Caucasus to the Indus Valley is inclusive at present, but it cannot be excluded as it has been proven now that large-scale Indo-European migrations took place during the same period from the Pontic Caspian steppe to Europe and Central Asia. There is no reason to believe that J2A people from the Kura-Araxes culture could not have expanded in the same way westward toward Anatolia, Greece, and Italy, and eastward to Iran, Central Asia, Pakistan, and India. There are there is another cluster of J2A with a frequency approximating 15% in Bacteria in Central Asia and in southern Central Asia, in what is now northern Afghanistan, eastern Turkmenistan, south of Uzbekistan, and west of Tajikistan. The Indo-Aryans pursued their southward expansion, invading northern Pakistan and northwest India from 18,000 BC to 15,000 BC, and eventually bringing about the demise of the Indus Valley civilization around 13,000 BC. There is a wide variety of J2A branches found in South Asia. Some are over 10,000 years old, could have migrated from West to South Asia during the Neolithic, Chalcolithic, or early Bronze Age, based on their geographies. F3133 and M319 could be associated with the Kura-Araxes expansion. Y21500 has a TMRCA of 3,700 years old and is also found in Russia, which suggests an Indo-Aryan origin. Perhaps one of the J2A1 subclades assimilated with R1A invaders in Central Asia before conquering the Indian subcontinent. So here is a migration of the Indo-Europeans, and again, here is a good map of haplogroup J, haplogroup J2, perfectly overlapping Indo-European languages and lands. There's a closer image of that, actually. So with all this being said, and putting the information together, we learned, what we learned is that, I would say that haplogroup J could be Indo-European in origin. Or, to put it in better words, early Haplogroup J males could have spoken PIE, Proto-Indo-European. Haplogroup J2 even perfectly overlaps with Indo-European languages. There's Haplogroup J2, there's Indo-European. Now, am I saying Haplogroup J was the only lineage to spread Indo-European languages? No. Haplogroup J would have been one out of a number of different Y chromosomes expanding during the Indo-European migration. So let me just say that again. I don't think Haplogroup J is the only haplogroup that was with Proto-Indo-Europeans when they were migrating. You had R1A, you had R2, you had L, you had other haplogroups, Y-DNA haplogroups, spreading with the Indo-Europeans. But I do believe J would have been among those peoples to spread. As said in this study right here, that we do find a J sample in Mesolithic Russia. So basically, all I'm saying is that J was among the first lineages of Proto-Indo-Europeans, and early J males could have spoken Proto-Indo-European, and that J haplogroup J lineages was part of the Indo-European migration. But haplogroup J would not have been alone in this migration. So we're at the conclusion. Now we're going to get to a Q&A part of the video where you can ask me questions concerning the topic of the video. But I am making a part 2 because this is not my final conclusion. I want to make that clear. I have a part 2 and a part 3 because this is not my final conclusion. Just like I did with my Haplogroup E video, I'm just giving bits and pieces of information, but there is still a lot of more information that we could look into when it comes to Haplogroup J, ancient samples found throughout the Mediterranean and things like that. So I'm just slowly making a case for different ideas. So now we can get to the Q&A. But remember, I have a part 2 and a part 3 coming out.
Yeah, brother, you got the oven. You got the oven on low right now. You know what I mean? You got the oven on low. You know what I'm saying? I'm putting the link in the chat if anybody wants to come in and speak to Brother Avery. Questions for today's topic, please. Speak or forever hold your peace. I'm looking in the chat, scouring for questions. I see statements, but I'm looking for questions. All right, we got our brother Ngozi in the building. Shalom, brother.
Shalom.
I'm sorry. Could you guys hear me? Salam alaikum. Shalom, shalom. How y'all doing?
How we doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm good, man. I think you did an excellent breakdown. You went in. I just wanted to say that we want to remind everyone, because you broke down, you showed it, you went through the sources, scientific methodology, going through the sources and backing what you say. But I just want to say that we cannot let R1B off the hook, because most of those Yamnayas with R1B and R1A, some of them would have been J2. Reasons why: because the Yamnaya were a crossbreed between Eastern hunter-gatherers and Caucasus hunter-gatherers. And we do know that the earliest Caucasus hunter-gatherers, some of them had the earliest phase of J. So these dudes from the Eastern hunter-gathering populations, really similar to the Maltai culture, which links Yamnaya really close to Native Americans. For those out there that claim aborigine, they had a connection with those Eastern hunter-gatherers who were partially part and partial cousins to the people that came to the early Americas. But another portion of the ancestry came from those Caucasus hunter-gatherers, and we understand where the first J was found, with fair skin. But those Caucasus hunter-gatherers also was a crossbreed between those hunter-gatherers or local hunter-gatherers that was in northern Anatolia, who later became farmers. Most of the Anatolian farmers they did not speak an Indo-European language. They had a language isolate, and the closest population to them would be Sardinian type people, even though today they speak another language. But they had a language isolate, and they were mainly J, G, and small fragments of E that lingered up there. But they also had that light skinned gene too, because when they went into Europe first before the Yamnayas, the people that the Yamnayas was killing, or the Yamnayas was killing, was those Anatolian farmers who were like distant cousins to them, primarily on the maternal side that they descend from. But some J2 was there. Even though the Yamnayas was taller, a lot of the farmers were shorter, but they had a genetic tie through that through the Caucasus hunter-gatherer portion of their ancestry. So I just want to say I think you did a great job, but I don't want people to let that R1B off the hook or the J off the hook, because all of them are slightly invaders to different regions and different phases of history. You know what I'm saying? And this is why to this day, the Middle East is clashing primarily with those Haplogroup J carriers that hijacked Arabia in the early Middle East, and they fighting with their distant cousins.
You spoiling it. You spoiling it.
Hey, yo, I'm gonna fall back though. Y'all doing a good job, man. I appreciate you, brothers.
Thank you. And you're right about everything. And yeah, R was definitely those Yamnayas, and some of those J's would have been among them. And you also spoiled about the isolate. I was going to wait for that for my fourth video.
Oh no, you got the detail. No, you got the detail, bro. I ain't even gonna say nothing else. I know once you get it in, you and y'all ship the way y'all getting it in. No, bro. I mean, it's just to entice the crowd, because you guys are going through it. I think y'all rocking it out. So I'm just gonna fall back and listen in. But I just didn't want to let that R1B off the hook, because they thinking, say that
R1A.
Yeah, R1B and R1A. Yeah, we can't let them off the hooks, because even with us over here, we've been inserted with that crap, because the British and Irish thing, slightly mixed with us. So we got a lot of that shit in us as well, from the Yamnayas. I was joking in the chat. I was like, some African American men have white fathers and Yamnaya grandfathers. That shit is in us. It's been inserted in us, yo.
Yeah.
So big up to the E's. Big up to the E's. Peace and love. All right, guys. Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum.
Shalom. Peace.
Shalom.
All right, I'm looking for more questions, and can't find anything yet. If you guys are watching, please submit your questions or click the link in the chat. If you have any questions about Haplogroup J, I think we had a Jewish person on here.
Really?
Yeah. He had some inflammatory statements to say, but I would wish he would, have the testicular fortitude to click that link and, put his question, submit his question in.
Let me read his question there. Let me find it, because.
No,
Oh, was it like a really, really bad?
Yeah, I timed him out for what he said, but
okay,
it wasn't a question. It was like,
I wonder if it was Javid or one of his cats.
I think this is more of a statement, but if you want to touch on that.
I always thought it was Haplogroup R that originated white skin, but now we see it as Haplogroup J. Yeah, so the Caucasus hunter-gatherers would have been the first people to have light skin, and light skin also developed independently in some other regions of the world too, but the ones associated with like a lot of modern Europeans have the light skin that originated with Caucasus hunter-gatherers, and they mixed with, of course, the Yamnaya people who had Haplogroup R, and then they would have spread it as well as mixed with other peoples as well.
Okay.
Even people with Haplogroup I were at one point dark skin. As a matter of fact, that's who is interesting when I'm kind of spoiling a little bit of my future presentation, but it's interesting when you think about these Proto-Indo-European light-skinned peoples migrating into Europe, because originally a lot of the people in Europe were dark-skinned, like Chatterman and whatnot. And so these Yamnaya people migrated into India, who again ran into dark-skinned people. And so it's like they're conquering and wiping out a bunch of dark-skinned populations of people is when you start to think about it, really. And then, you know, the expansion into Europe by the colonial powers. I mean, the expansion into Europe, into Africa by the colonial powers. You know, it's like a continuing history in a weird way when you think about it.
I think this comment was based on your segment when you were talking about Jay and its connection to light skin. And I think they're saying that gene or that haplotype is Canaan.
Sound like Canaan descendants to me. I'll actually do a video on the descendants of Canaan in the future. They're very important people to know about when studying the various neighbors of Israel. So I'm not going to answer that question. Well, it's not even a question, but it's more of a statement. But yeah, I'll touch on the descendants of Cain, because really there's different types of Canaanites. It's really a name of a geographical region. You know, there was a lot of different ethnic groups living in the land of Canaan. So
You want to touch on this?
on what? Neanderthals had pale skin, colored eyes, and red hair. Do you have evidence for that?
Yeah, I never seen any evidence about Neanderthals having pale skin. Let me find you another. Let's see. Everything's statements, you know. Everything's. They were having a conversation in the chat. Sister says this brother's work is priceless.
Thank you.
Picking you up.
And this is just the first video. We're just you know, giving a little icebreaker, a 2-hour icebreaker. But you know, my other videos will get a little bit more specific.
Higher be praised says E is traced to Proto-Semitic, while J is linked to Proto-Indo-European.
Yes, E is traced to Proto-Semitic, and basically what I'm saying with J is that it could be linked to Proto-Indo-Europeans, their expansion. There's still more to be understood about Haplogroup J. Still a lot more. But early J men, you definitely could find some people who would have spoke Proto-Indo-European. But all of them, well, that's what the next videos will be about.
I'm kind of confused on this statement here in regards to your representation.
I quest.
I guess that's what it's supposed to say.
Oh, okay. It was a Q. So, all right. So I guess red and light skin is too different. It's too different. I guess red. Can you restate your question, but a little bit more thoroughly? I didn't quite understand it.
All right. So
also, there's a link if y'all want to push it to ask questions, just in case you know you're tired of typing or whatever. Haplogroup J was originally black. This haplogroup mixed with Neanderthals. All right, so can you give me evidence for that as well? Like a paper, like a scientific paper? Because I provided scientific papers. I think it will be only fair if you do the same, you know?
I don't know. When did you mention Neanderthals? Because it was like a segment of comments where they were talking about Neanderthals for a second.
I only mentioned it once, and it was dealing with the amount of Neanderthal DNA that the Serbia together had. But I only mentioned it once. That's it.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with your overall topic. Yeah. All right, you got a brother. This brother gonna have 1,000 questions, so be ready.
All right, let me get my water.
Welcome, DIM 10 Commandments.
Yeah, what's going on, y'all?
Shalom.
Peace. Look, right now I only got one question.
A bit loud in the background.
Yeah. Also, okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah. Right now I only have one question. Peace, everybody. I meant to ask this yesterday. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. When the 49ers was on there. Hosted it?
I wasn't. I don't think I was. Was it on here? Because I haven't been on YouTube's channel in about like 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Okay, the other brother did. What's his avatar says 49ers on it?
Yeah, that's not me.
I spoke to you last time. I remember.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, the question is this: if everybody comes from the Y chromosome Adam, right? Ultimately, I'm just saying, according to the narrative, right? Then wouldn't everybody have the same DNA?
Is that to me or Yeshua?
Both of y'all.
Everyone would not have the same DNA, but if you watch the show, we would like you to have the question, have any questions, geared towards what was presented. But the answer in short is this: we have a shared humanity, but Y chromosomes diverge from each other and they become distinct.
I understand that. I'm saying, but when they come distinct, isn't it? Don't it leave still a similarity to the rest of them?
No, they become. That's what distinct means. They become separate. They become their own entities. But yes, they come from a natural branch that they all sprouted from. But once they diverge, they become their own thing.
If they become his own thing, how are you able to trace it back to the same common ancestor, though? If it comes his own distinct thing, wouldn't that be kind of difficult to do that?
No, not at all, because they mutate. And the brother said it right in the chat. Mutations. The mutations make them distinct. They're not the same as the founding father of all of the branches.
Okay, no, I understand. Okay, but if they're not the same, but they are the same in the sense of that you're able to trace it all back to the founding father.
Yes, you can trace them all back. All Y chromosomes go back to the putative Y chromosome Adam.
And what would that chromosome be? Like, is it A1B1A or what?
I have a differing opinion on that. That'll take a different video because there's no evidence of BT. So I would tell you, look up BT. There's no evidence of BT to connect everything. So I would say,
okay. That's cool. It don't have to be that one. It don't have to be that one. But what about the? I guess the oldest was in, correct? Can we use that one?
I'll give you my model. Y chromosome Noah. I will just call it that for now. Produce AB, which would be Ham, and then produce DE, which would be Shem, and produce CF, which would be Japheth. That's the basic, simple breakdown of that. But in order to actually understand it, I'll have to do a whole presentation just on that. But today's video wasn't about that, brother.
No problem. I would like for you to do a video of that because then I would like to know, is that science or is that just philosophy or belief based upon a narrative, and we're just putting A, F, and J to particular groups.
Well, it's based on interdisciplinary studies, and I'm not the only one that holds that belief. We showed Nathaniel Jeanson today. Nathaniel Jeanson believes that all humans come from 3 nodes. You catch my drift? A node is a branch. 3 nodes, 3 classes of men, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So it's the same thing, but I would have to give you all the references like the brother did.
Well, that's interesting what I'm saying, but see, I'm just wanting to clear up some confusion that's in my head because remember you talked to me. We talked a couple of days ago, and you said the Y chromosome that is passed on to the father. I mean, to the son, to the son, to the son, to the son, and so on, right? And so, if we're going to go with that logic, that means the Noah, all his sons will have the same Y chromosome as their father, and all their children will have the same chromosome, Y chromosome, or similar chromosome to their fathers.
You know,
I'm saying if we're going with that logic.
You know, maybe we could do a after show and we can talk about this. I kind of want to keep all the questions pertained to like Haplogroup J, the Yamnaya culture, stuff like that. But we could definitely talk about this like after the show because
okay, that's cool. Peace.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
You got
I'll stay on hold.
You got a Clubhouse app? I am.
You see, do I got a? No, I don't.
I would download the Clubhouse app and maybe we can talk about it there.
Okay, Clubhouse.
Yeah,
app.
yeah,
Okay.
we can talk about it there because I got to get ready to head out.
Okay, down there.
Wait, what? I didn't hear you.
Did you want me to download that now?
Yeah, download it right now.
Okay, peace. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
We got some questions in the chat. We got Hybrid Praise says, could Haplogroup J have adopted the white skin genes from mixing with Neanderthal?
I don't think Caucasus hunter-gatherers were the only humans to mix with Neanderthals. You had others. So I will have to possibly say no, but I have to also look up a paper that says that. If you can find a paper that says that, then yeah. But from my understanding, they just got the mutation. They developed the mutation on their own.
Luminous Mind Game says, in your hypothesis, does light skin equate to pale skin or white skin?
Yeah, it even says it in the paper. Let me find it. You want to look at this part right here. You can look up the specific mutation SLC45A2 and SLC424A5. And I think I talked about it in another part too. Let me see where else I talked about it. I talked about light skin also right here. When I say light skin, I'm not talking about how we say light skin as in a light skinned black person. That's not what I mean. Here's another paper that goes in the skin color and vitamin D with the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. Here's a good map also. Light to intermediate skin. But yeah. So does anybody have any other questions? Wait, is that a question? Is there going to be an after show? Yes, there will be an after show. I'll be eating though while we do it, but there'll be an after show and I'll be in the background. I'll set it up on my Clubhouse account, and Yeshua can invite y'all. As a matter of fact, I could can I put it in the chat or whatever? I'm gonna create the Clubhouse right now and put in the chat.
Yeah. I tried doing that before. It was so long.
Oh, it was like a long link?
Well, try it, see what happens.
Okay. Let me see.
I'll try to do it through my phone, see what happens. But High Be Praised again says, if its brother haplogroup I was black skin, aka Cheddar Man, it is strange that it originated the light skin gene without Neanderthal admixture.
If its brother was wait, Haplogroup I didn't develop light skin on their own. They got it from mixing with the Yamnaya people who conquered them. Wiped a lot of them out, but also took some of the women in. A lot of times they just murdered people, like in that paper I showed, how they massacred a whole like family.
Wait a minute. Is this Ray?
Where?
We'll talk about it. And
Oh my goodness, I know now. I
Clubhouse.
see now. I see now. That did not look like her though.
I thought that was Lisa for a minute.
No, wait a minute. I see what you're talking about.
Okay, all right.
I'm gonna create. Don't close it yet. I'm gonna first make the room and put in the chat so at least people can see it. I'm trying to put a topic real quick.
Yeah, John Mill basically said the brother doesn't understand roots and branches. Right. That's why we're going to try to, if he gets on Clubhouse, bring him up to speed on basic genetics and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about theories with haplogroup A being the progenitor of all haplogroups. I disagree with that. And there's reasons why. It's just not just because.
Dr. Jensen has a good reason why.
Yeah. I don't follow the secular model of haplogroups. I follow what I have termed or seen as being termed the starburst model, where all males come from 3 nodes or 3 branches.
All right, I'm going to put it in the chat. All right, so you just share, or you copy the link. Okay. Yeah, you should see it. It's right there. You can highlight it. I just now posted it.
You posted in the comments?
Yes. My name is in Hebrew. My name is the Shema in the actual Hebrew letters. I could also type it in.
Hold on, wait a minute. Did you make the room already?
Yeah, I made the room. You can join it.
That's what I'm looking for. All right, there you go. Got you. All right, so let me copy the link and just go to the YouTube and drop it in, see if that works. Cool.
Yeah, I just got home, bro. I missed it. I thought you were going to do it later.
Oh, wait.
Later at night, bro. People got to go to work, and I like to watch it live.
All right, there we go. There we go. Yeah, bingo. All right, you guys should see the Clubhouse app in the chat. Royal Prince says he's there. Mixed Connections. I know you're going to be there.
Can you also put in the chat?
Should be in the chat.
I mean, not the chat, but the screen.
Is it
the bottom screen?
Can y'all see it? Let me try it on here. Let me try and do it from. Can you guys see the chat? Can you guys see the link in the chat?
That's weird. It's online. Hold on. Let me try something one more time. It's weird. I could put it on. I was gonna say Twitter, but I can send it to your phone, Yeshub, and then maybe you can copy it and send it.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing it through my phone, and I guess my YouTube is blocking it. I'm not sure what's going on right now. Give me a minute. I'm gonna try to copy and paste it from the computer. Copy link address. They said they don't see it. They don't see it. All right.
That's weird.
See, that's not going to work because when I copy something from Facebook, it always does that. I hate that. Let me send it as an email.
I guess I could just type it all in. Let me try that.
Let me send it as an email.
Yeah, let me type it in. See if that works. HTTP S.
All right, you guys bear with me. I know Royal Prince, we know you on there already. But I'm trying to give the link to everybody on the live now.
I wonder if it'll also work if you close or if you uploaded the video and then just put it in the comment section. I wonder if that also could work. But here, I put it in this way. Did it work?
Let me see. Hold on. They said it won't because Clubhouse. Sean Harris. Yashub with a Y. Yashub is a car. There we go. There we go. Can you guys see it? All right, there we go. That's the link to the Clubhouse.
How'd you do that?
I had to do it through StreamYard.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to do it through my phone and it wouldn't. It was just being dumb.
Okay, that makes more sense actually.
All right, one more before we leave. Right here.
Yeah, one more question. All right.
Go ahead.
I asked because in the articles it's mentioning lightning of skin color, which could result in a variety of phenotypes other than straight up pale skin. Well, I'm just going by what it says. Hold on here, Echo. Let me put my phone away from here. So I'm just going by what it says, which is that the Caucasus hunter-gatherers were the first to develop light skin, and this was passed into Europe and into Central Asia, you know. And then we look at modern Europeans, Central Asians, Northern Europeans, they're quite light skinned. So I believe that they would have been, you know, very light skinned. As a matter of fact, I even showed you Kurgan graves and the likelihood of how these Kurgan peoples looked. And this is what they come up with. And I would say that Caucasus hunter-gatherers could have been from white to tanned in skin tone, which is still like white. It's just a bit darker, if you want to say dark, you know. But I believe this is a good example of what Proto-Indo-Europeans look like. And I would say that these guys are light-skinned, definitely lighter than me. So hopefully that helped out.
Anybody's welcome to the Clubhouse. Just click the link. I'm going to post it again. Everybody's welcome. We're getting ready to close. The after show will be on Clubhouse exclusively and not on YouTube. So if you want to be a part of that, I advise you to hop on Clubhouse. If you don't have it, download it. It's on Droid and iOS. So yeah, we're going to start doing these after shows more on Clubhouse. So if you guys want to be involved, get your questions in. You guys maybe didn't want to ask questions live, you can do it on Clubhouse and have a different setting. So if there's anything else you want to add before we close, if not, we can just close it down.
The only thing I'll add is I have another Haplogroup J coming up. I only briefly touched on Group J and its distribution and origin. There's much more to learn and understand, dealing with migration patterns, dealing with the language that they likely spoke, dealing with their phenotype. So we're not done. This is not my only Haplogroup J video. I have more on the way. I have 2 more, and then I have a bonus video, actually a few bonus videos, because I took so long trying to, you know, fix my internet that I feel like I'm going to give you all some bonus content. So we got more J on the way. We're not done.
All right, you guys, click those links. Click those links. Get in the chat in Clubhouse. If you have any questions or you just want to dialogue about today's episode and the breakdown. All right, with that, peace, shalom. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, Genesis 49ers on YouTube. Leave a comment and share on the social media platforms. Shalom.
Shalom.